be able to talk here today about the best part of a year's work. In the year that culminated with Occupy and the associated protest movements, James and I at the start of the year sat down and decided how we were going to take advantage of Reuters' special reports. These are deeply reported stories that have supposed to have a very high threshold of revealing information. In between our day-to-day jobs, we wanted to really take advantage of these special reports to look at in detail China's perceived creeping control of Hong Kong. It was quite clear to us that there were lots of fears of this creep and control. But right at the outset, James and I decided that the way to make this work would be to look beyond the fears and try to look hard at the mechanics of it. Who's doing it, how it's being done, why it's being done, taking full advantage of Hong Kong's still open society in that you can access information about companies, about people. Certain records are available from the government. So over time, we really wanted to explore how the liaison office, for example, was working, the United Front organizations were working. These are things that generally the Hong Kong media allude to, but they don't cover in depth. So we decided, we knew we were setting a hard threshold for ourselves, so we decided to really look at the mechanics of it quite rigorously.
I think many people in this part of the world, they are aware that China, you know, just as a sovereign power, it has been doing its utmost to protect its own interests. And on its periphery, they've got Hong Kong, which has a long reputation for active civil society freedoms, and so, you know, everyone has this sense that there has been a degree of control, and it has been increasing through the years since 1997. So we wanted to, as Greg mentioned, move beyond this kind of vague feeling that this was the case to really come up with hard details and to document instances of this in which, you know, ideally we could get documentary evidence through rigorous sourcing, through, you know, a wide range of individuals across various sectors, and to gradually build up a picture. And you know, the things that we found were that, you know, despite Hong Kong's one country, two systems formula, there were many instances where, you know, this control raised concerns. It was definitely within a grey area, if not beyond a grey area, and in excess of what should be permissible limits to protect Hong Kong's autonomy. So we started off, we knew that Occupy Central would be kicking off at some point in the late summer last year. Of course, at the time we had no idea it would have exploded to this extent, but the whole the whole Occupy Central incident, it did speak to underlying tensions that have been bubbling away in Hong Kong through the years. And you know, through this reporting, we could address those underlying tensions. And so we went out, we started off with a Hong Kong piece, and then as we dug, other avenues came up, and we kept exploring those new leads, and some would pan out, some wouldn't, and we just did it from there.
Given that our concept was quite broad, we knew we had to get specific. So after looking around and speaking to a lot of people about the way the liaison office worked and the relatively shadowy United Front associations worked, we honed in on on a little group right in front of us. Never appears in the papers, but if you look at it sort of from the outside, it is very, very strange. You have, for years, the Falun Gong have been tolerated in Hong Kong. Nobody's suggesting they're particularly popular. They have these street activities where they put up displays and so on. They're not to everybody's taste, but I think most people would see them, most Hong Kongers would see them as a sort of barometer of Hong Kong's freedoms. They can stand there on a street corner, they can put up banners that are critical of the Communist Party, they can hand out leaflets, they can hand out their own newspapers, and increasingly we noticed this group was challenging them at various points around the city. The Care for the Youth Association. And we went down and watched them in Causeway Bay and Tsim Sha Tsui, and we could see that over time this group was really minutely organised. We suspected there was some quite good funding, interesting funding there. They were pushing, you could say, the limits of Hong Kong's sort of street protest laws to the limit, and that at times they were using fake sirens. There was some jostling. They were putting banners right in front of the Falun Gong banners. So we thought, right, let's home in on this group. Let's see who's behind them. To do that, we realised they were registered as a society. They were registered as a company. It would be a lot easier to get the information. They were registered as a society. Now, the beauty of Hong Kong's continued openness means that if you know where to look, this information is public. It's held by the police. We applied to the police for a list of the office bearers of this association under the Society's Ordinance, which the Society's Ordinance exists actually essentially to basically ensure that triads, it's very difficult for triads to operate legally in any legal form. It's a colonial hangover. One of the few organisations that's not listed in the Society's Ordinance is the Communist Party, which is a historical wrinkle which I probably won't go into today. But we homed in on this. We applied to the police commissioner. It took 2 or 3 letters, but we eventually got the list of office bearers, which enabled us to then track certain individuals to known United Front organisations. And the best part of it was a state-owned brewery in Beijing. So we kind of could lay out some circumstantial evidence in this piece. Again, we kept a very high threshold for fact over simply reporting fears or supposition. We kind of got there in the end.
There were, there were instances. Once we pursued this paper trail, we would eventually come up with instances where we'd have to go out on the ground, and once we identified a couple of these guys who were leading these pro-Beijing groups, we actually went to their offices in new territories, just basically following up in every way, getting fair comment from these individuals, and they weren't particularly friendly. There was one guy who called the police on us, and we were just in the lobby of his building, and so yeah, there wasn't. Yeah, he didn't sort of greet us with open arms and give us a bear hug and stuff. There were, there were just all these leads that had to be pursued, and it's work that takes time and involves sympathetic editors, understanding editors who do give reporters, the resources and the time to pursue these pieces, and it really was a kind of slow accumulation of detail, being thorough, and and then the series kind of organically grew from there.
We looked down a lot of rabbit holes, so to speak, and not all of those rabbit holes produce rabbits. And if there was a time factor, it was that we did follow a lot of false leads. I would have liked to have got more detail on some aspects of the liaison office work. Overall, though, we're very proud of the series. It ended with a piece in December about some mainland ordered surveillance of Hong Kong Democratic politicians. That was a lead we had when we were researching, working up the July piece. We couldn't confirm this. Once again, we know the fears are out there that this goes on, and through a mixture of legwork involving a number of reporters and a stroke of luck, we were actually able to pin down a case that involved Democratic legislator James Toe, who had complained to the police about being followed. And we knew both sides of the story. We happened to be talking to James, and we knew part of the story that he didn't know. He had part of the story revolving around his formal police complaint that we didn't know, and it was one of those rare but beautiful moments where two parts of the story just bolt perfectly together. They fitted. It wasn't like, it was two different events. In retrospect, it felt at the time like a tremendous stroke of luck, and we couldn't quite believe it. But a number of people told us, well, really, you kind of, to some extent, you guys made your own luck because you didn't let go of the story that you couldn't confirm the first time around. You were still pursuing it and digging around and asking questions. Very, very simply, that story involved the hiring of former Hong Kong policemen to carry out actual physical surveillance of Hong Kong politicians. It was not done formally through the police. It was not done formally through any mainland body. It was an unofficial. Operation, sort of a black operation, you could say. It wasn't done under Hong Kong laws, as far as we could tell. There was no paper trail or anything else, but we managed to pull it together in detail that we're quite happy with. James too, in following up the leads that we got out of July, had a very good story as part of the series about a conversation between the head of the liaison office and two or three politicians that I'll let James talk about.
So, Jiang Xiaoming, the head of China's liaison office, just as part of the engagement process last year, he met, along with Carrie Lam, a bunch of Democrats, and this was just in the lead up to Occupy, and tensions were quite high at the time. And he, in this meeting, he basically laid out a veiled threat to the Democrats, saying that you're lucky that you're still alive. That was the particular line. So. There's a lot of bad blood between Beijing and the Democrats, and you might assume that these kind of things are nothing unusual, that you'd expect this kind of rhetoric behind closed doors, but to confirm it is the tricky part. It's always difficult when you're dealing with these kind of stories to get adequate sourcing that satisfies ourselves, not just ourselves but our editors as well. And it was surprising that this news hadn't come out earlier. But again, this was just another thread that emerged out of our kind of passion and desire to really make sense of these underlying forces and to clarify them and explain them as best we could. And so we also, were thinking in terms of audio-visual perspective, doing videos to accompany these special reports, and to work with our photographers to get whatever shots were possible given the constraints. But for this kind of investigative reporting, it's sometimes not easy to get TV and pictures involved when you're dealing with sourcing or documents. But yeah, that was definitely an important element of this as well. And then we went on to do special reports on Taiwan as well, looking at how Chinese entities, the United Front Work Department, which is a very high-level body under Xi Jinping, how they've been extremely proactive, aggressive in influencing Taiwanese businessmen, citizens in China, business people running factories, for example, in the Pearl River Delta. They hold regular meetings. There's an extensive web of United Front offices and operations in Guangdong, and just reaching out to people in Taiwan, retired defense officials, and through entities subsidizing airline tickets for them to get back for elections, so that they could maximize the blue camp vote potentially. So yeah, and we looked at Macau as well, just looking at some of the strategy and the details of how China would try to maximize its influence and control.
It was also, despite the seriousness of the subject, it was also a great deal of fun. It required, on the one hand, we had to learn a lot about things that are not very obvious in a systemic way, the United Front Work Department, as well as the Communist Party, and the way it's structured through social organisations and so on. But at the same time, we had to do a lot of legwork as well. And with the James Toe story, we had 2 number plates of silver Mercedes-Benz cars that we were looking for. We were able to get some car registration records, but we also spent hours and hours looking through various garages for these cars, and eventually, in one case, we tracked down the owner to a Kwai Chung car park, and we got an interview with the owner. We also, James later tracked the same car to a government car park in North Point, found the car. So we were able to close that end of the investigation with just some basic legwork. And again, although we've got work to do day to day, it was great to be able to have the time to do that. So if you guys have got questions, we'd be happy to take them. This was published on the Reuters wire and on the Reuters websites. It's still available online. Various pieces did very well on social media. In fact, there was quite a lot of commentary on social media about it, but it was published. It's still all out there. The special reports are also published in a PDF format, which these are the ones we've got on screen, which is a very readable form. So, yeah.
We'll post them up on our website as well.
Gentlemen, was there any reactions to your story? Official reaction? Response?
There was, James has an interesting story about his reaction, I think.
Yeah, for the Jiang Xiaoming threat to the Democrats, the liaison office actually came out. They made the rare move of coming out with a statement in which he he acknowledged that he did say those words, but at the same time he got a dig in at us, saying that we'd twisted his words or whatever. But he did actually come out, the liaison office did issue a formal statement, and
They said that it was accurate.
yeah, pretty much. But they did also have, you know, they attacked sort of us for twisting the words or whatever. But it was, yeah, that was one instance where it was made tangible, the fact that they were at least reading the story, they were aware of it and responding. But for the other ones, there was less of a direct link to the liaison office, or
The other, yeah, there was less official reaction. The James Toe story got used locally. A lot of media outlets picked it up, ran for 2 or 3 days. I learned later that no local reporter had asked for James Toe's statement to the police, which was pivotal to reporting the piece, which would have given you the number plates and you could have started your own investigation. So it sort of ran in the local papers, and we're very pleased about that. We're also pleased that I think the understanding of the role of the United Front in Hong Kong, we've noticed a lot more references now to it in blogs and online. A number of reporters locally have told us that we were getting into areas that were effectively taboo among local reporters to really detail China's operations in Hong Kong, and it kind of informed their own reporting as well, which was good.
The same question as the gentleman asked me before. Like, how do you do this? I thought you guys supposed to do like dailies, and how do you spend time digging out these things? And how do you, meaning that you don't have to do other works just on this, or sort of, just curious.
I think a lot of people do have that perception of Reuters that we're, you know, wire service, very knee-jerk, responsive. But actually, you know, we have been making a very concerted push into enterprise journalism, into more deeply reported, longer stories that can stretch, you know, up to 10,000 words in some cases. And you know, we did a piece on Chengcheng Guangcheng in New York. And so that's, I think, you know, within Reuters, we're very conscious of the fact to have a breadth of reporting these days, and so yes, it's a juggling of resources. I still had to do the daily stuff, and during Occupy Central, I was pretty much camped out every night, but I still thought it was important to chip away beneath the surface as well, and it's not easy, but you know, when there's a big story, it's what you've got to do, and the editors are supportive of that.
There is an understanding. It's, you know, you could say it's a process that's still being worked through, but it's a concerted effort that's being made. So there is an understanding if you're on a special, what we call a special, and it's running hot, you've got specific work to do, that you're given time. We never counted up the man hours we put into these stories, but yeah, they would have been, you know, we spent huge parts of last year on it.
For 1 year, piece by piece.
Yeah, I mean, it was the best part of a year's work. I mean, we were doing other stories. James was extremely busy during Occupy, and I write stories about the region, South China Sea and so on. And I'm sure some editors were quietly frustrated when they wanted me for other things, but if they were, they never really openly expressed it. There was support, so it's good to know.
how do you handle your sources and even those who are unwilling to speak even off the record? How do you persuade them?
One of the frustrations I had, it's a good question, each source is slightly different, and these, for various reasons, these specials, it's not like something you're rushing into print tomorrow. So in the case of James Toe, when he revealed the information to me, and I realised straight away that his little bit of information bolted perfectly with this other bit we'd been looking for, I realised how hot it was, but I also had this horrible sense that we're not going to be getting this story out tomorrow because we've got an awful lot of work to do. So I had to kind of convince him and keep him kind of on the hook and let him know that we were digging around, but just hold off on telling other reporters if he could. And while I'd had some dealings with him many years before, I mean, I didn't have a lot of dealings with him in recent times, that was, I think James and I were talking once, and one of us said something like, with these stories, we were using every bit of reporter's nous that we basically had at times. So, yeah, the sourcing thing was constantly difficult. But all through it, because we'd made this conscious effort to look beyond the fears and concentrate on facts that we could prove and stand up, that really helped. That really helped.
And I think just the nature of the sensitivity of the topics, nothing beat just really giving chunks of your time to a source, just making the effort to sit down with them face to face, making sure that they felt it wasn't just a quick hit for a quote or something, and that kind of patient, that sincerity towards the sources, it actually goes a long way. It's a bit old-fashioned, but it's vital. It's nothing beats it.
Yeah, I'd had dozens of meetings with James Toe during Occupy, after Occupy, and I didn't have many new developments to inform him about. I just had to kind of keep him engaged and understood that we were frustrated that we knew the story was going to take a while to get out. And I think I haven't spoken to him in detail about it, but he may have had moments of doubt. But when it came out, I think he was kind of surprised at the extent of what we were able to dig up about the other side. And I think he said on RTHK that he'd never seen such a degree of journalistic effort in his time as a Hong Kong politician. So that was nice when he said that. Because the other thing, in terms of managing the source, I wasn't able to tell him everything we knew because A, we were still figuring it out, B, we had to keep certain elements of the operation against the Democrats just to ourselves until we were ready to go with it. And so some of the conversations were quite interesting, but it was, we got there in the end.
I have two questions. First one is, in your reporting, when you are sourcing your story, how much percentage do you use the document and source, and what kind of sources, what kinds of people are the most useful? And the second question is that when you cover the story in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, do you notice any difference in the openness of government in terms of the government officials' willingness to talk and the availability of government documents?
Perhaps James can answer that second question, but the first one very quickly. The documents didn't prove, they weren't a key part in the story from the reader's perspective, but they were absolutely key in getting certain information. The number plates, we were able to track owners, and frankly, if the police had turned down our request under public interest for the list of the office holders of the Care for the Youth Association, we wouldn't have ever been able to track them to different United Front bodies and to a state-owned brewery in Beijing. And we would have have really struggled with the story at that point. So in the way the story was written, not very important, but for the story itself, absolutely vital. Others, so on the Taiwan account.
So, sorry, your question was just how the openness in these places may have changed. Was that it? Sorry,
Different, I think.
Okay. Well, Hong Kong, actually is great for public record, and there's very good access to information. Sometimes you have to be persistent to keep pressing government departments or whatever for responses. Macau, as you probably suspect already, it's not so straightforward. It's a bit trickier. Their sort of company registry access is more problematic. You tend to have to know more specifics before you can start searching. So yeah, Taiwan, I think there is a degree of access. I wasn't one of the main reporters on that. We had a bureau in Taipei that was driving that piece, and Taiwanese guy, Yimu, in Hong Kong, who was doing the reporting out of Hong Kong and southern China. But yeah, in general, I think there's a surprising wealth of information out there. It's just having the persistence to dig it up, and that's pretty much it.
Sorry, one more question here.
I'm from Myanmar, and we are running English daily version and Myanmar weekly version. So our publication has to rely a lot on the advertising sales. So sometimes there were some propositions or the requirements from the marketing side, the commercial concern. So as writers, how are you balancing your editorial policy and the commercial concern? Or there are any crossing over or the conflict of interest things?
Reuters has given a lot of thought to this over time. It's a very old organisation, and they have the Reuters, what's called the Reuters Trust Principles, that maintain editorial independence. And I think a core part of it, there's an understanding on the business side that what the business side is, it's almost an unspoken understanding that what the business side is selling is the integrity of the Reuters name, which has been built up over many, many decades. And it started out not as a business, but as a cooperative. It's obviously now a business, but those principles have remained and are absolutely core to what Reuters does. That means that we didn't have to worry about any of those kind of considerations in doing these stories in practical terms. But because integrity and notions of fairness are so important, especially for this investigative material, we knew the threshold was very, very high in terms of backing up as anything that was perceived to be an assertion, a fact, stripping the pieces of any tendentious language. That's one of the reasons it took time to get out, because there was a degree of rigour, and it's linked to that integrity. Now, I know it's a constant dilemma for media organisations, but that's how Reuters has dealt with it, and it's perhaps has the advantage of being a very old organisation, so there is that understanding of what's in the name.
Let's give James and Greg a hand, please.